Welcome everyone, Costin here with the discussion about the most broken factions currently in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires beta. Now obviously it's subject to change, subject to fixes, but I do want to talk about the legendary lords and the factions that have the biggest problems currently in the game. What those problems are, what could be done to fix them. At the very start of this list, I'm going to be talking about the Empire. It doesn't matter if we're talking about Karl, Franz, or Balthasar, Gelt. They're both in the same boat. Volkmar and the Huntsmarshal, they have their different starting positions. They don't have to deal with the Imperial System. And it's the Imperial System, the Imperial Authority system, and prestige systems that are the issues here. Not the Empire itself as a faction. The Empire has a pretty solid army. They have pretty solid legendary lords. They're not the best, but they are certainly well off from those perspectives. The problem, however, is, especially for Karl, Franz, though also for Balthasar or Gelt, it comes down to the systems of Imperial Authority. But first off, we do need to talk about something when it comes to Karl, Franz, and that's his starting situation. So his starting situation is in itself pretty broken. So he has this faction, the Imperial Secessionists, that he starts a war with, and they have two armies. This is similar in a way, though not nowhere near as bad as the situation Tsarina Catherine has. And I've talked about Catherine and how she has a genuinely miserable position, because not only does she have a powerful rebel faction to deal with from the very start, but she's surrounded by legendary lords, 6 in total, maybe even 8 if we're counting Archeon over here and the Demon Prince, but likely 6 that can pose a threat, 3 of which will almost certainly pose a threat. For Karl Franz, it's kind of the same problem just for him, just for the territory he directly controls. Because he has these secessionists. They're not really too difficult, but the problem is they have Helmgart, and you really want to take it. You want to take it to take out their last base of operations. This is likely going to be one of their last strongholds, maybe Eilhart, but you want to take it out. You also want the choke point to be under your control. So that is a frustration to begin with. That's already a difficulty to begin with. But there's more. There's more and there's worse. To the south, we have Grom the Paunch. And Grom, like many AI factions that are against you, will likely declare war against you as you're playing Karl Franz. And he's likely going to assault the Reichland. Heinrich Kemmler, not necessarily going to be an issue, but Grom most likely will, because Grom's position here, yeah, he has the Fey Enchantress, but she's not really a threat to him, and these Britonian factions are just easy meat for him, so he's unopposed more or less, unless we're thinking about the Wood Elves, which likely will declare war against him, but he's unopposed in a lot of ways, and he's gonna make a beeline for Helmgart, or if you don't have it, he's gonna go past it. And the problem is, you're gonna have other issues to deal with, so you already have one legendary lord that's going to be a problem from the very start, and he is a serious problem. Greenskin invasions with Wa armies behind them, where basically they have 2 stacks for the price of 1, makes them incredibly potent. But then there's another problem, and that is the issue of Marienburg. Marienburg does not like you, to put them mildly. They're not part of the Empire, they really dislike you, and one of the things that I think the AI is hard-coded to do is to take Eilhart. And regardless of whether or not you or the Imperial Secessionists hold it. So after a couple turns, after they build up their armies, they'll do so. Britonia might even join in, or they might side against them. It's hard to say, though. In this particular case, Britonia, you do start with the non-aggression pact, Britonia, but they do form a military alliance with Marienburg, and Marienburg takes Eilhart, then yeah, that can end up becoming a problem. Now here's the issue with Marienburg. You can kick them out, sure. You can do so pretty quickly and efficiently, but the problem is you don't necessarily want to take their territory. You don't want to have this land under your control, the wasteland under your control, even if you would like to have the province. And the reason is, because to the north, you've got Wulfric, and Wulfric generally becomes a problem for whoever controls the coastland, and you don't necessarily want to be fighting Norska when you have other issues. You have Grom to the south, you have Wulfric to the north, you have Kazrak over here, who is going to be a faction that's going to send the entire stack against you within the first few turns, most likely, and you're going to have to defeat that. Beastmen armies aren't too strong, but a full stack is still a full stack of troops. even if those troops mainly are going to be Ungor raiders. So we already have a situation where we have 2 legendary lords that raid against Karl Franz. We have Marienburg as well. That's potentially going to pose an issue, and those are just the problems you're going to face directly. The issues, the threats that are going to threaten you directly. But then there is the Imperial System, and this is where things really become broken. Because fighting 2 legendary lords and a powerful faction from the start, you know, that's manageable. But doing that while also dealing with a broken system is really what pushes this over the edge. And in fact, the Imperial System is a major issue for Balthasar Gelt, who has a much better start and doesn't have these kind of problems. To be very clear, like, Gelt doesn't have 2 legendary lords he has to fight from the start. Maybe, you know, maybe if the dwarves decide to maybe if Belegar decides to declare war against you, but not necessarily. And so Gelt has a much easier time. But even so, for Gelt, the campaign systems are just as broken. So what's so broken about the systems? Well, you have the prestige system. Prestige is used for certain events that come up. So you have dilemmas that come up. Okay, that's perfectly fine. That's not really an issue. And you can also use prestige to improve or decrease relations between various factions that are actually part of the Empire. So this is not counting Marienburg. Okay, so you can do that. The issue, however, is this is pretty pointless unless you want to prevent wars between certain Imperial factions. But the diplomatic relations that you have with other Imperial factions are incredibly limited. This is all you can do. You can sign a non-aggression pact, you can trade, you can get the trade agreement, you can get military access, and you can trade settlements. You can also declare war, but declaring war is not something you really want to do against Imperial factions because it's going to cost you Imperial Authority, a lot of it. So you're stuck dealing with that. And the problem is, while they might give you military access, one of the issues that you will certainly have is that while you're in the territory of another Elector Count, you don't have replenishment while in that territory. It's not like a military alliance defensive ally. You don't get that kind of replenishment, which can be useful if they're trotting along the Empire, helping them reclaim territory for their fealty, because each Elector Count has their own fealty, and if, say, they lose territory, you march an army, you can give territory back to them in exchange for fealty. And you want to get that fealty up because once you get to 10, you can either confederate with them or you can get some Imperial Authority. Okay. But here's the real issue, the Imperial Authority. You would start with 0, so you're already at -5 growth for all provinces. Now, this is not too big of an issue because the Empire does have pretty solid growth. Like, you have 20 over here. Once I take all these settlements, especially with the grazing pastures, not going to be a problem. But here is what's going to be a problem. The Imperial Authority system was already an issue because you gain authority by, let's say, reestablishing a faction that might have gotten wiped out of the Empire through various dilemmas and so on. But you lose free Imperial Authority every time an Elector Count gets wiped out. It doesn't matter where they are, it doesn't matter who they are. If a single Elector Count, like Averland, Stirland, Ostermark, Ostland, Hockland, if they get wiped out, you do lose free Imperial Authority for each of them. And this was already a problem in Warhammer 2, where you didn't have the same kind of issue with the Beastmen as you do right now. The Beastmen are a lot more aggressive and a much bigger problem, I feel, in Warhammer 3 than they were in Warhammer 2, even with the rework. Marienburg was still a problem, but those are things you could deal with. But now, in Warhammer 3, we have far more severe issues. So you still have the issues of Sylvania. Sylvania was already a threat to begin with. Now they're even worse because Vlad is just going to be a powerhouse of a faction. Like, well, Manfred, it's like all of Sylvania belongs to Vlad, and he's going to be quite the powerhouse, potentially. Like, if you're playing Gelt, you can deal with him, but he's certainly going to be an issue that you're going to have to deal with. Then there's Drycha. Drycha is going to march on the Ostermark, and she's very likely going to take it. All of it. Potentially. Though she generally does stop at their capital. The AI, for whatever reason, in Warhammer 3 is not so keen on assaulting capitals. But if she does take the Ostermark, and she absolutely can within, like, let's say, the first 10 turns, then you end up in a situation where you lose free Imperial Authority, where you may lose free Imperial Authority. And even if she doesn't take out the Ostermark herself, we have Isaac the Slaughterer, who is either going to declare war on Kislev or the Ostermark, or both, and descend with his Wa from the mountain, because he's not going to be stopped by Kadrin. He's going to descend with his Wa from the mountain and likely take out the Ostermark. So you have two legendary lords that are aimed squarely at the same electro count in the Ostermark. Okay. That's a potential, however. It's not a certain. What is a certainty is, and what they've added with the Champions of Chaos DLC, is Festus. So Festus starts at War Hochland. He will always wipe them out. This is not up for debate. It is an absolute certainty. What might be questionable is when he's going to do it. Might be first 2 turns, might be first 3, might be first 10. It depends. You know, the RNG can work in different ways, but one of the things that is absolutely certain is that he is going to wipe them out. Maybe if you were to rush an army very quickly there within the first couple of turns, potentially maybe even ignoring the rebels, you could potentially stop him to prevent that decline in Imperial Authority. But you're going to pretty much have every campaign as Gelt or Karl Franz with -3 Imperial Authority. So you're going to have declining, you're going to have less control, less income. Not too big of an issue, but losing fealty, potential of losing fealty, even if it's only 1%, things can go really badly very quickly. But that's a potential. But that's a potential of maybe only having -3. The worst case scenario, and this is where things really get badly, Ostermark likely falls within 10-20 turns, maybe Sylvania gets out of control, and then you have the problem between Osland and Katrin. So Katrin and Osland don't really like each other, and in virtually every single campaign that I've played of this game, Kislev ends up at least in control of portions of Osland, though not necessarily their capital. Though I have seen it on occasion being taken over by Katrin in certain campaigns. So there's the problem. There's a real kicker in the teeth. Like, Midland is also under threat because Kazrak and Festus might take a liking to it, though it's close enough for you if you're playing Karl Franz, or even if you're playing Gelt. Karl Franz starts with the entire province, so he's absolutely going to ride out and do things about it to stop Kazrak. So Midland is unlikely going to fall, even if they're being reduced to Karlburg over here. But they're also going to be under pressure. Hochland is certainly going to fall. Ostermark may very well fall. Osland may very well fall to your supposed allies in Kislev. And that's within the first, let's say, 10-20 turns. Hochland within the first 3 turns. This is an incredibly broken system, because if you reach, let's say, if you were to reach -9, you would be just 1 Imperial Authority from a full-blown civil war. But at -7, you're already losing quite a bit of growth, income, control for each province. This needs to change in some way, shape, or form. And the initial problems of Drycha, Kislev, Festus, that's on top of the issues that already existed in Warhammer 2, where this system was already causing enough headaches if you were trying to play Karl Franz, in particular due to his hard start, and even as Gelt. That's the issues, of course, in Marienburg, Sylvania, Azak. Those are already problems to begin with, but now it's much, much worse because of the changes to Kislev and the addition of Festus, as well as the way the Beastmen work. So you've got 3 problems. Like, Katrin has all of their issues, but she will almost certainly end up in a war with Osland. She might even end up in a war with Ostermark. She might be the one that finishes the job, the Ostermark. I mean, it's not enough that you have Drycha and Azag. No, and you might have Kislev itself coming down to take it out, especially on something like Legendary. So you do have a lot of problems, and the Elector Count AI, well, let's say it's very questionable, would be putting it mildly. Now, how would you solve it? Well, I think the problem is you have no way of really telling your ally, your fellow elector counts to do. Like, you don't have a military alliance system. You don't have the allegiance system to, like, give them orders like, oh, defend this province or this territory, do X, Y, and Z. That would go a long way. I also feel like not having Helmgart in the hands of the Imperial Secessionists, if you're playing Karl Franz, would be a godsend, because it would help neutralize Grom. Because Grom is not going to ignore Helmgart and just march on the right. I mean, he might, but generally he's going to try give it a go, and you can certainly hold him up there or inflict severe casualties, allowing another army to come in, deal with his force, and liberate Helmgart. So yeah, the Imperial Secessionists are too strong. You're surrounded by foes, and the system just doesn't work very well. I also think maybe actually starting with some Imperial Authority, because we know things are going to go to shit. Let's be clear on this. Like, these issues that I've talked about, ignore the elephant in the room, which is Wulfric, who is going to certainly be coming down from the mountains, so to speak, and descending on the Empire. Then you have the Greenskins over here in the Black Pit, also a threat. So Nordland is going to end up having issues as well. And yeah, you just have a lot of problems, and it's quite a challenge. The problem is it's a really stupid challenge as things currently stand. Just because you don't have any ability in any way, shape, or form to control or dictate the actions of the Empire. You don't have a system in place to allow you to do that. You're very, very limited, and you're running around trying to put down fires. It's generally a miserable and broken campaign right now. And I like the Empire. I want to play them, but it just feels very frustrating. Hell, it felt frustrating in Warhammer 2. It's even worse in Warhammer 3. The second faction on this list to talk about is Prince Siegful the Magnificent of the Warriors of Chaos. It has to be said that the Warriors of Chaos are currently the most powerful faction in the game by far and away. Extremely powerful. Instant global recruitment, powerful units, ability to vassalize, powerful economy for Dark Fortress, economy from vassals. You create doomstacks. You lead the tide of death on the mortal realms, as any of these factions. The only one that doesn't do this quite as well is Festus, because he starts in the middle of the Empire and doesn't have easy access to vassals. But even Festus is incredibly powerful despite his lack of vassals because of his plagues. So me talking about the Warriors of Chaos faction here shouldn't be taken as an indication of a faction's strength. None of these factions are necessarily weak that I'm talking about in this video, but they do have problems. These particular legendary lords do have problems. Siegful's issue is, I feel, a bug or an oversight by the developers, because they were rushing the development of Immortal Empires, and we're pretty certain that they wouldn't have released it as a beta as they did over here. So what's his issue? Well, Siegful himself uses Slaanesh corruption. So Slaanesh corruption will generate control, give you a higher budget for seducing units, and give you benefit of income from old buildings. Here's the kicker, however. Although you use Slaanesh corruption, and Siegful himself personally generates Slaanesh corruption, he starts with 4 by default. He has a skill that gives you 4 extra, and then obviously you can use Cast Sorcerer of Slaanesh to generate even more, which I certainly have done here. Okay, so you can generate corruption with Siegful, but what's the problem? Well, your minor, your altars, like for instance, if I find one actually, yeah, the Twisted Towers, the Chaos Shrine or the Chaos or the Ritual Huts, they do have an upgrade that I did research over here in the Slaaneshi tree that gives you 2 Slaanesh corruption for each Chaos altar, 2 from each active gift of Slaanesh. Okay, that's all well and good, so you earn corruption for that. But, and this is where it really hurts, your main settlement buildings, be it your Dark Fortresses or your minor settlements, basically non-Dark Fortress settlements, all generate Chaos Undivided corruption, +3 for minor settlements, starting at +2 for, or +2 for the Chaos Fortresses, the Dark Fortresses. And that undivided corruption is going to conflict with your Slaanesh corruption. Never mind the fact that your main settlement buildings actually, like if you're holding a Dark Fortress in a settlement, like it's the only settlement you have, because you might want to give the rest of it to vassals, like I did here in the Cold Mines. Your main settlement building might be your main source of corruption. Until you get the Chaos Shrine, it's worth getting a Chaos Shrine because it gives you that massive economic benefit, plus 30% favor from all buildings in a local region. So it benefits the spoils of war. But your main settlement buildings are going to generate a great deal of chaos undivided corruption, which is going to cause a lot of issues. Because that chaos undivided corruption, just to demonstrate that this is my starting settlement, the literal one I start with, it has 100 chaos undivided corruption, which does absolutely nothing except enable attrition for non-chaos worshipping armies, and it has only 40 Slaaneshi corruption. And the only reason it has 40 is not because of anything I've done, it's because my vassals here are generating Slaanesh corruption. The Aegol are generating Slaanesh corruption because they've been dominated, they're enraptured by Slaanesh, which is something that Siegful can do as a faction. So you have a major problem due to this oversight, because without Slaanesh corruption, your public order is going to be very, very low. So for instance, here it's only 6 control. In my starting region, it's 4 control. And for control, the control you get from corruption is crucial towards maintaining your public order. It gets even worse though. It's not just an oversight of the main settlement buildings, it's also an oversight of the commandments as well. Because the commandment gives you chaos undivided corruption as well. Now, for every Warrior of Chaos faction, this commandment, or for any demonic faction as well, your commandment here is also a major means of corruption to generate public order. The fact you don't have the proper commandment, and the fact that you don't have the proper settlement buildings, like Azazel does, like Azazel has Slaaneshi corruption from his main settlements, from his commandment, the fact you don't have that creates a major problem for you as Siegful. Even though you're playing one of the best factions of the game, the legendary lord you're playing is bugged. Simple solution, right? Simple problem, simple solution. Add the Slaaneshi corruption. I'm pretty certain this is not intended. If it is intended, then it's going to create a miserable campaign. It is doable. It is winnable. Make no mistake on that. It is very perfectly winnable despite this, but you're just going to have to spend a lot of time, energy, and resources dealing with the corruption problem. But it's not like winning as the Warriors cast is difficult. It just, in this case, it's just broken. It's a bug, or an oversight. It needs to be fixed. It should be fixed, hopefully with the first patch that they will release for Immortal Empires. And finally, we get to the most broken legendary lord in the entirety of Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires, Thoric Ironbrow. What's the problem? Well, I think it's pretty evident, but right at the top here, the meter is full. The grudge meter is full. It's only turn 20 of the campaign. It starts half full at the very start of the campaign. It will fill up within 10 turns. And you can only slightly reduce it to angry level if you fight across from here. And I'm very serious on this. You start here, and you have to fight your way all the way here to reduce it by 1 bar. And it doesn't matter anyway, because in that turn 20, and I've literally just taken Karaka's skull, by turn 20, it's gonna fill up again. So what's the issue? Why does he have such a grudge meter? Why does he have such an insane grudge meter? Well, he has all of his... if we go to the Forge, this needs to be explained in the Forge. So we have the Artifact Vault, right? These are all the special artifacts that he can make. Now, each of these artifacts generates a grudge. Each grudge, right now, is counting 24. Each of these grudges is 24 on this meter. I've already solved 2. And I'll get into the problem of just solving those 2, by the way, because it's kind of bananas. Well, I've solved 3, but one of them was a minor one. It wasn't a relic, I believe. But what's the what's the issue? So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Each grudge, each of these, every single one of these is at turn 20, 24. You do the math, right? It would take only 5 of these to fill this meter up. I have 6 left, and in 10 more turns, it's going to increase again. I believe it's every 10 turns that the grudges double, even. So even if I solve some more within the next 10 turns, it still doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. Like, you can rush for these artifacts. You can go from battle to battle, fighting like a maniac that would make Horn proud in all the blood that you're letting, and certainly be giving Scarbrand the run for his money, considering what you're doing across the entire campaign map. And look at the distances that you're gonna cover, and it still won't matter, because unless you literally solve all of them, or maybe all of them but 2, no, actually all but 1 of these artifacts, you're going to have this grudge meter filled for the entire campaign, essentially. And I do mean it for the entire campaign, because your win condition is to get 5 of these artifacts. It would take more than 5 of these artifacts to actually reduce your grudge meter, considering how quickly this thing is filling up. It starts half full, it doubles in 10 turns, it doubles again at 20 turns. It is bananas. And that's just the values of the grudge meter. That's not counting everything else that comes with this. So let me explain why. You start here. You have a gold mine. That's the only silver lining of this entire campaign. If you're playing the Empire, if you're playing Siegful, those are playable campaigns. They have frustration. They have issues. Forik, I can't really consider a playable campaign unless you feel like playing with -3 public order and -20% research for the entire campaign is playable in your books, which is actually quite a shame, because he should be a great deal of fun. But let me explain what the issue is. So you start here. There's a greenskin faction that occupy 2 of these settlements, and they have a capital over here. Okay, you need to make these artifacts. There's one here held by the last defenders. You can take them out, not too big of an issue. Dwarves certainly have a powerful army. Alright, you can take them out, get the artifacts, or just sack the settlement, get the piece, whatever. In my case, I've built an entire stack somewhat with Gortrek, just because I didn't want to pay the upkeep, and I could certainly go out and take these guys out, or have a serious fight and eventually take them out. But that's for the first. That's for one artifact. But it's not the first you want to focus on. You obviously want to take control of this region, wipe the greenskins out. There's another artifact here, and I believe the one here and the one here are linked, so you make an artifact with that. That's within the first few turns. Another artifact is here. Okay. Another artifact is in Lamia. All right, so we're dealing with the greenskin faction, the last defenders, the Silver Host from the very start. Not necessarily the worst fight in the world, right? But then then there's what follows. The vampire counts declared war against me, though I'm not particularly concerned about Manfred. What I am concerned about is that Scarbrand declared war on me, which is a far more serious problem, especially considering where I have to expand. Now, in order, so you get 3 artifacts if you take Lamia, Karagorund, and the Golden Tower free. You need the 4th. The 4th is in Asgol. Guess who's in your way? Queek. And Skaven are notorious when you're playing against them, especially on Legendary, but on any difficulty, Skaven are just a nightmare to fight early on because they get really large armies, not powerful armies, but very large armies, and they throw against you. I've wiped out Queek. Within 20 turns, just to understand what I've done, I've gone from here to here for 3 factions, including Queek Headtaker. And now I'm having to maintain an army down south here, protecting my region, dealing with the last defenders because I had to declare war against them. And it doesn't matter anyway, because you have -3 control. And even worse, your diplomatic relations with your fellow dwarves are massively affected by this grudge meter being filled in. The solution to this situation: have the grudges either stay a static value throughout the campaign, or your starting grudges be a static value that doesn't change, or start them at a far, far lower value that doesn't double every turns. I don't understand the developers of Creative Assembly sometimes. Like, I hate to say it, but sometimes, or a lot of the times when I'm playing the games, I'm just wondering myself, do these guys even know how to play their games? Do they even play them properly? Do they have an understanding of how people are going to play their games? Like, I get it, Immortal Empires was rushed, I get it. But there's just so many questionable... But did no one think that putting grudges that filled up half your meter from turn 1 that double every 10 turns... Did no one think that was gonna be, I don't know, is that gonna be a bad idea? The worst part is, like, if you're like, for the grudge bearer, for Forgrim, it's not the same issue, because his grudge, like, let's just compare a situation to understand just how absurd this is.
What?
Forgrim, right? Do you know what he starts with? He starts with a grudge to take Black Crack. Ooh, really hard, considering it's held by Skaven, right? By a minor Skaven faction, really difficult to fare. Oh, he has another grudge that he may not get the reward for. He'll certainly succeed in it, but he may not get the reward for. But he has another grudge to fight and win 5 battles against Skarsnik. By the way, that's another issue. If you don't fight those 5 battles, just to reveal an issue about the grudges, if you don't fight those 5 battles yourself and win them, like, let's say you wipe Skarsnik, right? Because it's like, okay, you take these free settlements, no big fucking deal. You come here, Skarsnik only has free settlements, so that's free battles, and it's like you come here and it's like, okay, I'll just finish the grudge, no big fucking problem, right? Nope. If you do that and you haven't fought those 5 battles, you won't get the Master Rune of Spite, which is one of the best bloody runes that you can get in the game. Just an issue. Right now, the grudge system, like the Imperial Authority system, is just completely and utterly broken. It needs a rework. I think actually the dwarves had needed a rework for a while now. They kind of gave us one, but not completely, with the release of Forik and Warhammer 2, but it has had issues. It still needs fixing. It still needs improvements. Maybe we'll get those improvements with, I know, the Chaos Dwarves. Who knows? Though they're probably going to be their own faction who plays very differently from the regular dwarves, or maybe they're going to copy a lot of things. We'll see how that ends up playing out. We shall see. But yeah, Forik right now, say what you will about any other faction, any other legendary lord in the game right now, to a degree or another, even something like Hatrin, for all her misery at the start, they are playable. Forik is not. Like, I'm sorry, for the diplomatic relation research and control, it's like, you could do it, but it would easily be the most miserable campaign in the entire game at this point. That's all I had to say. Costin here signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, enable notifications. Stay tuned for more. If you do enjoy the content, consider supporting the channel via PayPal or Patreon. Could certainly use some donations at this moment. And I'll see you next time.